we're going to talk about financial matters and estate planning matters. You need to tailor what you do to your own personal situation. So if you have a brain disease, neurologic condition, my wife has multiple sclerosis, you need to contemplate that in the planning that you do, in the documents you do. But let's go through some of the basics. I'm going to do financial things first, then estate planning things second. So one of the things that is really critical to do, and if you haven't done it and you're quarantining or have downtime, or unfortunately have time out of work or are not working, create a financial roadmap. So point one, create a financial roadmap. And by the way, all of the remarks that I'm making, I've written a detailed white paper that the American Brain Foundation will make available to you to get more detail on everything I'm saying. And if any of this is helpful to you, if you don't get a chance to take notes, they'll have this white paper that has everything in it. So what you want to do is list on this sort of financial roadmap, and I would prefer you do it on computers so you can update it. Otherwise, it's going to get outdated and useless. Make sure it's available and accessible to people that you rely on in an emergency. So you want to list every recurring monthly bill and expense you pay. Because if you're not well for a period of time, and that could happen because not only COVID, but just not feeling well, it could happen from an exacerbation, a relapse, and so on. Somebody's going to come in to help. They need to know what bills to pay to keep your lights on and your utilities going. They need to know what bills to pay. So what you need to do is get a list together, and you want to list what each bill is. The electric company, your account number, how it's paid. Is it paid automatically by debiting your checking account? Is it paid by a credit card? Do you get a bill in the mail? Do you get a bill by email? They need to know where to find it because there could be so many different options. It's no longer like the old days where every bill you got came in the mail and you wrote a physical check. Write down each vendor, each bill, what it is, and what happens. You want to segregate out all the monthly bills because those are the things that are due every month to keep things going, and an agent or whoever the loved one is that you trust to help you is going to have to address that. Next, I would do a list of all non-monthly bills. So you may have a life insurance premium, a long-term care premium, property tax may be quarterly or semi-annual depending on how it's set up. Then list all the non-monthly bills because those may not be the recurring ones, but they're going to be ones someone's going to have to check out. List all your income sources, where they come from, what they are, and how they get to your bank account. So it may be dividend checks, it may be interest payments, it may be salary, it may be unemployment, it may be disability payments. Whatever your sources of income, list them and give enough detail that if you're not able to follow up, somebody can follow up and make sure they get your money and get it into your checking account. Now, we're going to talk later about automating all this, but you need a roadmap first if someone's going to help you. And the roadmap can help you too. Provide contact information for all key people, your broker, your financial planner, your insurance agent, your lawyer, if you have one, so on and so forth. All the key people and contact information, and provide any emergency instructions. So step one, part one, create a financial roadmap. Next, you have to create or review, if you've already done, hopefully, a financial plan. In this COVID challenge that we're all living through and we're struggling with, you need to update your financial planning. If you don't have a formal financial plan, do it. Even if you're wealthy and you think you don't need a financial plan, you need a financial plan because you can't do proper estate tax planning. You can't do income tax planning without a financial plan. You need a financial plan. For the vast majority of people, they need a financial plan because they got to make sure they have enough money to live on, and you want to make sure that if you live long enough, you don't run out of money. So the starting point of a financial plan is a budget. If you are living with any brain disease, neurologic condition, other health issue, you got to make sure that you're not relying on some standard pre-printed or embedded in the computer software package numbers for what your expenses are. You got to use real numbers. Your expenses could be markedly different than what average expenses are for somebody of your age or income level. You need to get real numbers. If you haven't automated your checkbook and put it all in computer, critical that you do that at some point. And if you have downtime, now is a great time to do it. If you have all of your financial information on Quicken, which is what we use, you can literally just push a button fairly quickly and list expenses by category for the last 2 years. You go down and see every expense you've paid by category for 2 years, so you have a comparison. You can jot some margin notes and come up with a budget that's pretty accurate. You got to get a budget. If you're having financial issues, if your retirement accounts were reduced because of the market decline, if you're rolling over bonds and you now are facing interest rates that are almost zero, you need to look at slashing expenses. That's going to be a critical part of your budget. You can't reduce expenses without the knowledge of seeing what they are and what your cash inflows are. Once you have a detailed budget, which would include income, cash flow, expenses, and any changes that you feel you can make. If you can afford a financial planner, get one. If you think you can't, you probably still can, because most of the major financial firms include financial planning for account owners who do it at a fairly discounted rate. Fee-only financial planners, NAPFA is a great organization. There's lots of ways to get one. Get somebody objective to review it. If you can't afford or find anybody, have a family member or loved one. If you can't afford an accountant or independent financial advisor, look at your stuff, because it's so hard to do it objectively. Somebody can help you. Do financial forecasts or models. There's great software available for free or for nominal costs on lots of the different financial firms' websites to project what your retirement and your future looks like. Having budgets, having income and expense figures is great. What it's going to look like in 10 years, 20 years. Assume you're going to live to age 90 or 95 at minimum, unless you know specifically because of your health issues you won't, because you don't want to run out of money. Next step, if you haven't already automated your bills, do so. You want everything on autopilot. If you have a period of time, whether it's a relapse, exacerbation, an unfortunate bout with COVID, you're helping a loved one who's sick, you're a caregiver for somebody that's got brain disease, you want as much of your finances on autopilot. If you get sick and somebody has to step in, an agent under a power of attorney, which we'll talk about, everything that's on autopilot makes less work for them. If you get sick, it's all on autopilot. We have personally, every bill that can be billed to our credit card is billed to a credit card, and the credit card's paid automatically out of our checking account. If a company, a vendor we use won't bill to the credit card, we have it automatically debited out of the checking account. We write very few checks per month because everything is on autopilot. This also can help you avoid risks and issues of elder financial abuse, of identity theft, because it gets rid of all the stuff in your mailbox that can so easily be pilfered. Next practical tip in the financial arena, and then we're going to get on to estate planning. Do what I call a wallet dump, and I want to give credit to a colleague, Susan Bruno, for the idea. It's really simple and clever. Dump your wallet on the table. Take a photograph with your smartphone of the front and back of everything in your wallet, every credit card, every piece of ID, driver's license, everything. Make sure that if you haven't had your phone have like a password protected to get into it, make sure that's done, and make sure you have everything on your phone, all your photos backed up to the cloud. I have everything on iCloud. It's inexpensive, easy, and great to use. If you ever lose your wallet, every piece of information is there. I also then save it to an encrypted laptop, which one of our kids has access and the ways to get into, so that somebody else can get to it. Do a wallet dump, protect yourself. We all lose our wallet eventually. Okay, let's change gears. That was quick, a lot of ground, but hopefully practical ideas. And I can tell you from being an estate and financial planner for 35 years that those practical things, those foundational things, are absolutely crucial for everybody, regardless of wealth and income level. Let's jump into estate planning. So estate planning is much broader. It's not just planning for your death. It's planning for your future. It's planning to protect yourself. And we're going to give you some pointers as to how and why. Whatever you do in your estate planning, it needs to reflect any health challenges you have or your loved ones have. You can't use standard boilerplate. It may only mean a minor tweak to what's done, but you need to make those little tweaks to make sure things work for you. And if we had a longer time, we could go into some of that as well. Analogous to the wallet dump, where you take a photo of your wallet, do a document dump. Many people have no idea where their documents are, or they're in an envelope they got from a lawyer. If they had a lawyer prepare them, get a electronic copy of every single estate planning document. We're going to go through many of them: beneficiary designations for your retirement accounts and life insurance, power of attorney for financial matters, healthcare proxy, living will for healthcare decisions, will, revocable trust. You may have other trusts. Make sure you have a PDF of every one of those documents in a safe, cloud-based, backed up, and accessible place. You could put them in Dropbox and tell one of your kids how to access, or give them the access. We use in my law practice a program software called ShareFile, and we set up a portal for every client, like it's a private vault, and they can change and control the password. So it's all cloud-based. It's all backed up on our system. They can get it on their smartphone. God forbid you rush to a hospital, you can use the app on the smartphone to download a health proxy. Get your stuff backed up. Many people have no idea where their stuff is. Not safe, not good. If you don't have documents back up, you got a bigger issue. You better get them, and that's something you need to do now. Next point, write a letter of instruction. Everybody's got personal issues. Everyone's got personal thoughts and desires. You can't practically, and certainly not cost effectively, in many cases, it's not really advisable to put a lot of these personal nuances into legal documents. Put them into a letter of instruction. You have children that are young. How do you want them raised? You have to name a guardian in your will. What do you want the guardian to do? What kind of lifestyle for the children? You have religious interests. Explain what they are and how they affect your planning. You have family that may be religious and you don't want religious interests. Explain that. Address how you've disposed of or distributed your estate. If you left more to one child than another, explain why. Sometimes the little explanations, heartfelt, of what you've done and why can deflect or avoid any kind of fights or challenges later. Write a letter of instruction. Now, consider that in combination with the financial letter of instruction and the document dump for your estate planning documents. You're creating an inexpensive, not time-consuming, but a valuable roadmap for all the different aspects of your legal and financial life for somebody to be able to help you should you ever need it, and to smooth the transition if, God forbid, you become sick, disabled, or worse. Now, one of the things that's going on now, COVID has changed a lot. Because of social distancing, you can't necessarily get documents signed the way we traditionally did. The traditional legal document was signed in a room with a lawyer with two witnesses and a notary. You can't do that anymore. So you need to be able to figure out what legally can be done. If you aren't affording a lawyer and you go online to get documents, I don't know what they've done with the online services to address this, but even if you generate documents online, you need to address how to get them signed. Many, not all, many states have adopted emergency legislation that permits somebody to remotely notarize or witness certain documents. Sometimes it's a will, sometimes it's a power of attorney, sometimes they have different rules for each. It's a real quagmire. It's very complex because every state is kind of different, and this is all evolving, and a lot of the changes that were made are only temporary during a period when there's a COVID emergency in place. I hate to say that you have to have a lawyer, but it may be the only way you can really figure out how legally you can do a document now. I always try when I do a presentation to talk about people on the wealthier end using a lawyer, people that want to save or need to save money and do it online on their own. But in this COVID tragedy that we're living through, you may really need some specific legal help. You could try Googling what your state has done and figure it out, but it may be a little tough. Now, when social distancing starts to ease up, if you feel comfortable, perhaps with a mask and gloves, going to a law office and having things signed, or going to a notary if you're doing it on your own, then you can do it. There's ways you can sign documents with social distancing. We've had documents signed where we've left documents in somebody's door, stood out front of the picture window in the living room, called them on a phone, had them pick up the envelope, sign the documents in front of us while talking to us and answering the questions, put them back in an envelope, and then we picked them up, all being 6 feet apart and wearing gloves and masks, and witness and notarize. You can do the picture window approach. Some lawyers are doing what they call drive-by signings, where you drive into their parking lot. You may leave the documents on the hood of the car. You get out and sign them while the lawyer's 10 feet away. The lawyer comes over, witnesses with his or her staff, notarizes, etc., and everyone stays 6 feet apart. And then you come back out and retrieve the documents, and you're done. In some instances, remote electronic signings are used, but the law is not really caught up with what the technology is. It seems to me, but it's not the law, so don't go and do it and rely on it unless you know there's emergency legislation in your state permitting it and you comply with it, which may not be simple. That if you have a web-based meeting where you're recording everything and you can see everything and you can discuss everything, it seems like it should suffice, but the law is not there, so be very careful. Now, let's go through the key documents everybody needs. And let me preface this. If you're an adult and you don't have these documents, you need them. I don't care how rich or poor you are, how young or old. If you're an adult, you need these documents. I'm going to run through them real quick, then we'll talk about them. Power of attorney for financial matters. Healthcare proxy to make medical decisions. Maybe probably a living will to set forth what legal and medical and end-of-life type decisions you want. A will, and probably a revocable trust. Now I'm going to talk about those in a little more detail. Power of attorney is a document that you authorize somebody, an agent, to make financial, legal, and tax decisions if you can't do so. Now, it could be that you're sick. It could be that you're worried about going out. It could be worried about you don't want to retrieve a document. Can you have somebody sign it for you? Yes, if you've named them as your agent, that's the technical term, under a document called a power of attorney. It has nothing to do with a lawyer, but that's just what it's called. The power of attorney needs to be what's called durable, keyword, which means it has language that says if you're incapacitated or ill, the power remains valid. It's an oddity that's just sort of a historical anachronism that you have to address. Now, what is unique about powers of attorney in a COVID environment? Well, traditionally, agents would sign things. They would go to a bank and physically sign something. Can that be done? You may want to consider, but you got to be careful. This is all new stuff. You probably should talk to a lawyer and not just do it on your own. I can't imagine any of the online forms have this because it's new even for lawyers. Authorizing your agent to make decisions and communicate decisions electronically. So you may want an express provision permitting an agent to direct a bank or lawyer or anybody to take certain actions for you or make decisions on your behalf using Zoom, Skype, Facebook, FaceTime, GoToMeeting, WebEx, and indemnify and hold the person harmless for relying on that. Here's another thing, and this is really important, and I said in the beginning I was going to try to focus on some specific, unique, new COVID considerations that haven't been addressed. Many powers of attorney are what are called springing, technical term in quotes. Springing power means it's only effective when I'm incapacitated. Why do people do that? I don't want my kid signing my checkbook. If I'm alive and well, why should my kid have power, or my friend, my neighbor, whatever, my brother, over my checking account? I get the concept. It feels more secure. In a normal environment, and I don't know that we're going to ever have quite normalcy back, what we used to call normal. In a normal environment, the power would be sprung and your agent able to act by getting a letter from two different physicians. That's a typical mechanism, saying you're incapacitated, you can't handle your financial matters, and the agent will handle them for you. But how are you going to get a physician to examine you and write a letter like that in this day and age? Right now, many medical, as we're speaking, many medical providers, physicians are in war zone environments with the COVID tidal wave that they're dealing with. Even if not, many are not working if they're not essential. And to have somebody who is not in an emergency situation physically meet with a physician for an exam to determine capacity just doesn't make sense. Get out your power of attorney if you have one. If you don't have one, you better get one. See if it's springing. How do you find that out? Read when your agent can act. If it says if and only if I'm disabled, as demonstrated by a letter from two attending physicians, etc., can my agent act? You have what's called a springing power. Call a lawyer, get a new power. If you're doing your own documents, get a new power. So that's some of the things that are new about powers of attorney. Now, another thing about a power of attorney. Most folks never had their adult children get one. If you have college-age kids, you got to have a power of attorney. You can get an inexpensive form power, but if, God forbid, your adult child is sick, you have no right to sign or do anything for them. Next document, living will. Living will is a statement of healthcare wishes. Should be done. Here's a critical concern in the COVID environment we're living in. Lots of the standard forms, you can Google living will, you'll find standard forms in a snap, have express blanket prohibitions against having intubation. Lots of people feel they don't want to have themselves kept artificially alive if they're terminally ill, if they're near the end of the life. They don't want to be intubated. They don't want feeding tubes, etc. That doesn't make any sense in the COVID environment. You may be able to survive COVID if you catch it, but you may have to be intubated. A blanket, no restrictions, no caveats, prohibition against intubation could be a death sentence. If you have a blanket prohibition in an existing living will or DNR that you've signed, tear it up, get a new one. That really may not be what you want. You may want not to be intubated if you're terminally ill and have less than 2 months to live or something like that. You don't want a blanket prohibition, especially now. By the way, just a quick aside in general, if you have any religious preferences or feelings, make sure they're reflected in your living will. It's almost universally ignored, and that's inappropriate. Healthcare proxy and HIPAA release. Healthcare proxy is a document in which You name an agent to make healthcare decisions. It's also called a medical power of attorney. HIPAA release, Health Insurance Portability Accountability Act. I know that's a mouthful, but lawyers like mouthfuls. It's really a medical act, privacy act to preserve privacy to your PHI, personal private health information. So you need to authorize someone to be able to make medical decisions, and there should be a separate short document, fairly standard one-page document that may authorize somebody to be able to communicate to your physicians and see your medical records. Now, here's a COVID issue. First of all, you got to make sure you have these documents. You got to make sure your adult children have them. If you have older parents or other family members you care for, make sure they have documents in place. What you want to make sure is you address the following. The healthcare proxy, traditionally, the agent would go to the hospital, talk to the attending physicians, make a decision, and sign some paperwork. Not going to happen in a COVID environment. Coronavirus is too contagious, and even immediate family, when somebody's dying, can't get in. You're not going to get an agent in to make a medical decision. If you can, do a new document, expressly authorize Facebook, FaceTime, Skype, WebEx, etc., any kind of electronic means of communicating a decision to the medical providers, electronic signature on documents, and expressly hold the medical providers harmless for relying on that. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. Now, another quick topic, create an emergency envelope. And this, I owe this to Susan Bruno, who I mentioned earlier. Very practical idea. Even if you have everything electronic, cloud-based, accessible on your smartphone, which you should have, as we talked earlier, print out your healthcare documents, your health proxy, your living will, make a list up of all known medical conditions, medications, et cetera, and have it in an emergency envelope you can kind of grab and go if you ever have to go to the hospital. 5 more minutes, we're going to wrap up, but we got started 5 minutes late, and then I'll take some questions. I see one already. The final couple of documents is the foundation of what you need is a will and a revocable trust. Traditionally, historically, most people simply did a will for a whole long list of reasons, especially if you have a brain disease or a neurologic condition, health issue, you want a revocable trust. And frankly, after this COVID tragedy, I think everybody should rely on a revocable trust. It's easier, it's simpler, it avoids probate. I wasn't so concerned about avoiding probate. It's not that big of a deal in many states. Some states it is, but you can't get to probate now. If somebody, God forbid, dies, you can't probate a will because the courts aren't open. Why ever take that chance? You want what's called a pour-over will. It just says anything I own on my death goes into my trust, and your trust can decide where things are divided. Your will may address what's called powers of appointment and naming guardians and naming an executor, and then pour everything into your revocable trust, which can provide for your spouse, your partner, your friends, whatever, and address those things. So in this current environment, if you are going to revise documents, I think I would clearly opt for a revocable trust. And that's really a summary of some of the key financial and estate planning steps that everyone needs. However wealthy or however poor, wherever you are in the income spectrum, the age spectrum, the health spectrum, every adult needs these core documents and planning steps in place. And the great part is many of these things you can do on your own while you're quarantining and really make your life simpler and safer and easier.